live streaming service. Hurricane Dorian appears to be strengthening at this time. We already pulled that trigger and made it a Category 3 on our estimates. The National Hurricane Center, well, they could be about to follow suit because the automated US Navy system is currently now saying Category 3. That has just changed. National Hurricane Center themselves have not upgraded the storm at the 9 p.m. update. They are still putting it at 110 miles an hour and a pressure of 958 millibars. Only 5 mile per hour difference between the two, but crucially, that category change, which is what really gets people's attention. Well, the latest from National Hurricane Center, life-threatening storm surge with significant coastal flooding is expected along a large portion of the U.S. southeast and mid-Atlantic coasts during the next couple of days. A weather flow site at Kalibogue Sound, Georgia, recently measured sustained winds of 37 miles an hour and a gust of 49. An observation at Sapelo Island also measured winds of 35 miles an hour with a gust of 48. So the storm is around 100 miles off the coast still. That is the magic number because it's been 100 miles off the coast ever since Florida. Shades of Matthew, really, only it's a little bit further away at the minute. But how long will that go on for? Who knows? My name's Nathan Foy. On this hour, I am joined by Orlando. Good evening.
Good evening.
We've been watching this storm for days, obviously, but during the course of today, it has shown signs of strengthening. We did worry that that could have been possible, especially as we entered the afternoon, evening hours of the day. And I think, according to models, we've got tonight, and then it should start weakening. But in the course of the next few hours, we could still see the storm officially get the Category 3, and maybe a little bit more. What are your thoughts, Orlando?
Yeah, the storm has definitely been a real pain for everyone involved, to be quite honest here. It's been very tiresome for everyone to monitor the system, and it's been very tiresome for those affected as well.
Of course.
And it seems as though it's a story that refuses to end because now the Southeast is still facing impacts of Dorian, and now the Carolinas are next as the storm moves north of Georgia.
It has been a tiring storm. Everyone's gone. It's just me and Orlando left here at Force 13 HQ live streaming. We're doing our duty, I feel. The northern side of the storm not looking quite so good in recent frames as we continue to look at that imagery, which is interesting. But there's still that convection blowing up. The southern side, western, eastern, still getting some dark reds into the blacker colors there, getting towards minus 70-degree cloud tops. This storm is indestructible.
Yeah, honestly, the stalling, it's been devastating for the Bahamas, and it was detrimental to the storm as well, but at the same time, it remains, at least for Force 13 at the moment, it still remains as to be seen as a major hurricane, and it's likely to bring impact to the Carolinas, and beyond that, well, it's only time will tell if what exactly this storm will bring.
This storm is 108 miles from Brunswick, Georgia, 113 miles from Savannah, and 131 miles from Charleston. I'm really worried, Orlando. We look at this imagery, the storm is moving due north, and I feel that Charleston area is going to get hit pretty bad unless we see a northeastward turn in the next 6 hours.
Yeah, that's honestly a big concern for me as well because Charleston is a very populated area, and I'm not sure how serious people have taken it down there with this system. And
It's
it's
going to,
honestly
I mean,
what?
it continues moving north for 6 hours. It's going to be worse than Matthew.
Well,
So let's put that into perspective.
that's bad if that's the case. I mean, hurricanes are bad on in their own right, but when you're facing a storm like this, it's very large. It's now having a very large wind field. I mean, relatively speaking to what it once was, um, and the hurricane force winds are also more extended outward. So if it gets really close to Charleston, then we're looking at widespread impacts throughout the area beyond power outages and damages. We could be facing life-threatening conditions.
Now, this storm could produce a storm surge of 7 feet all along that coast. Along with that, the potential for flash flooding, flash flood watches for loads of counties all the way along that coastal region. I did read them out earlier today. I don't think there's much point in me doing it again. I think it's pretty clear which areas are under flash flood watches, and they could become flash flood warnings later. If we do get flash flood warnings, I'll read them out when they come up. Let me just check if there are any new warnings that are in existence. I've not looked since our last update. It doesn't look like any are in effect, but you know things are going to get bad when you get the flash flood warnings. We talk about Florida. They have really got away with this, to be honest, haven't they, Orlando? The storm remained 100 miles off the shore, so only minimum to moderate tropical storm force winds were occurring along the coast of Florida. There were some isolated amounts of maybe 8 inches of rain, but generally it was less than 4 across the state.
Yeah, it's honestly Florida dodged a bullet here, relatively
Again,
speaking. Even if they faced impacts, it was pretty much minor to what it could have been.
yeah. Well, I was looking at radar earlier, and about 50 miles off the coast of Florida, you were looking at 12-inch rainfall and hurricane force winds. Whereas on the coast, you were looking at 1 or 2-inch rainfall in some areas, and only minimal tropical storm force winds. The difference that 50 miles can make.
Yeah, and it doesn't even sound that large, but when it comes to storms like these, the distance is very crucial, especially when it's very compact as well. Even with its size, it's Florida really did make it out lucky with this one.
Let's read out some flood-related warnings that are currently in effect. It might be beneficial to read these. I don't think there's any change since we were on the air earlier today with the flood warnings. I'm not going to read the watches, but just the warnings. I'd also like to point out there's some severe thunderstorm warnings currently going on in New Jersey, which is near you, Orlando. Any news on this?
No, I haven't been paying much attention. I've been elsewhere, of course.
There's a severe thunderstorm warning in the southern part of New Jersey. Let's just get some information on that. Central Cumberland County until 9:15. Severe thunderstorm located over Greenwich or 7 miles southeast of Bridgeton, moving east at 25 miles an hour. South central Newcastle and northeastern Kent counties until 9:15. 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and penny-sized hail. New Jersey again here, severe thunderstorm warning till 10:15 for Atlantic County, southeastern Ocean County, southeastern Camden County, southeastern Gloucester County, and southern Burlington County. I should have said southern Camden County there. So that's a lot of areas under that severe thunderstorm warning too. How far is that from you, Orlando?
That is some ways away, maybe 20, 30 minutes at
All right,
max.
sure. Rainfall totals along the Georgia and South Carolina coast now are reaching the 2 to 3 inch range already, so they're getting a lot more rain than Florida would have got at this point in the storm's passage. So, very coastal areas though. You go 10, 20 miles inland, there's been very little rainfall so far, but at the minute, yep, 2 to 3 inches in the Charleston area has already fallen. The Beaufort area, talking about 1 to 2 inches have fallen so far. Savannah the same, Brunswick probably just less than 1. So that's where we're at the minute. You can see some of the bandings moving ashore already, and if this storm does fail to move northeast, you could be looking at storm totals over 10 inches, possibly getting towards 15.
Yeah, that would bring potentially devastating flooding proportions of the area, because that's a lot of rain, relatively speaking, in a relatively short amount of time, of course. And this storm seems as though it's just never letting up. It's weakened significantly, and now it's just trying to push back up again. And it's just seeming as though it just wants to do its own thing, especially if it hasn't begun that northeastern turn. Hopefully it will, but if it doesn't, well, then we'll be looking at a lot of impacts.
Yeah, those in South Carolina, North Carolina, that's something we're really going to be watching tonight into the early hours of tomorrow morning. Even though we won't be on the air at that point, we will still be showing this imagery overnight tonight, so you can see the very latest on Hurricane Dorian in real time. The latest image on this loop that we're looking at, well, it's going to come up again shortly. It's showing us roughly a 5 hour, 6, maybe more than that. The last image there is from 1 minute past the hour, so that's 10 minutes old. Could have got a little bit better than that, but never mind. Still quite recent. And showing some of the oranges moving over land.
Yeah.
And some thunderstorms blowing up further north. So let's just read out some more flood warnings. Ones that have been in effect for quite a while. A river flood warning remains in effect for the St. Johns River at Astor. They are expecting moderate flooding occurring already. They are currently at 3.1 feet, and they're expecting a peak of 3.5 feet on Thursday. Flood stage starts at 3 feet, moderate flooding. Looking elsewhere, Wilmington, North Carolina issued a flood warning for the Wackamore at Conway, affecting Horry County in South Carolina. That's till 9:15 a.m. Wednesday. Oh no, that's Con. That was issued at 10:12 a.m. Wednesday, and that is in effect until when is it until? Further notice then, I guess. Yeah, further notice. And the flood stage there is 11 feet. They are expecting 12.4. Forecast flooding change from minor to moderate severity for northeast Cape Fear near Burgor, affecting Pender County. Flood stage there is 10 feet. They're expecting 14.4 feet by early Monday morning. And that's the same one as before. And I think that is everything in terms of flood warnings. So there's only 3 or 4 at this time. That will probably increase. There is a coastal flood advisory in effect as well. That is for the shoreline in Anne Arundel County. Tidal departure is around 1 foot above normal expected around the time of high tide. High tide at Annapolis is at 10:52 p.m. tonight. There could be up to 1/2 foot of inundation above ground level at 2.6 feet. Water ponds in the parking lot at Annapolis City Dock. Water ponds in the... Okay, I was reading it differently. Water ponds in the parking lot at Annapolis City Dock, causing parking restrictions in the area. So, pretty minor there. 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. coastal flood advisory. That is the shoreline in southern Baltimore County and the city of Baltimore, around 1 foot above normal as well. Alright, so not a huge amount going on really, but the rainfall is starting to reach land at this point. There is a lot... what you can actually see on the satellite imagery is another little flare-up just away from the hurricane itself. Some thunderstorms blowing up on the northeastern side, just popping up here and there just off the North Carolina shore. That is delivering a lot of rainfall by the looks of things. 1 hour totals of 2+ inches, so those are quite significant thunderstorms that are occurring. I wonder, I mean, I'm not well versed in these sorts of things, Orlando. I don't know if you know more, but are you seeing those little flare-ups there, not really associated with the eye wall at all?
Well, I haven't been really looking at satellite imagery lately. I'll have to pull that up. But if there is, that basically means that it's more than likely that there is heavy downpours going down on the
I'm just
ground.
wondering if these might be potential tornado threats later on, coming out of these
Well,
pop-ups.
there is a potential, of course, especially with tropical cyclones in general, for tornadic impacts. I haven't seen anything from the Storm Prediction Center, but there's more than likely that there will be a possibility for if things like that to occur associated with Dorian. We've
Well,
seen that happen in the past in many instances.
we're also joined by Ram now. You're in North Carolina.
Hello, yes, I am.
Good
It's
evening.
been,
Nice to have you on.
thank you. It's really been the talk of the town, obviously, because I am from the Carolinas. I mean, I could just go anywhere and just random talks about Dorian, and I'm just, you know, well, trying to inform everyone about what's really going on. Um,
So your area, is it particularly at risk from tropical storm conditions there? You're inland, aren't
all
you?
right, I'm a bit inland, yeah, closer to the Raleigh area, but we are currently under a tropical storm warning, I believe. Like on the far west side of that. So about maybe I think it's a 40% chance about roughly according to the graphic, or 30, 40
Yeah,
for tropical storm winds
something
here.
like that. Low 30s, I think, for Raleigh. 32, something like that. But I mean, you look towards the coastal areas there. You probably know them certainly better than I do. If this storm fails to move northeast in the next 6 hours, there could be severe impacts along the South Carolina coast. 12 inches of rain, 7-foot storm surge, winds into hurricane force. What kind of impacts do you think we could see from that?
Definitely, my dad actually owns quite a bit of property down in Charleston. I've actually been there quite a few times, and it's a very low-lying area. So even just 7 feet of storm surge can definitely get in, cause a lot of flooding, and do quite a bit of damage, despite not being the 18 to 23-foot storm surge that the Bahamas had.
Well, yes. Just thinking about Matthew when it happened nearly 3 years ago, that was also pretty bad for the area. Can you recall how much surge was occurred out of Matthew for those areas?
No, not. I can't recall how much
Me
surge.
neither.
Yeah.
But it looks
guess
to
it'd
me
be about
like
the
if
same,
it does
maybe.
continue in a northerly heading, this could end up worse than Matthew, given the storm's intensity, and it looks like
Definitely.
apparently it's been strengthening.
Yeah, there's been an increase within recon data of
Yeah,
low and the
tell us
flight level
about this
winds.
recon data that's just been coming out recently.
So when I was looking at recon earlier, there was a spike of 120 knot winds in the flight level. The pressure of the storm continues to get closer, approach to 955 millibars. Uh, Beyond that, there have been SFMR readings, not quite at 100 knots yet, which could explain why they haven't gone with an official upgrade to 100 knots.
I'm sorry, it
Uh,
just makes me laugh because just when they didn't initially go with the Category 5 status based on
uh,
not going
yeah,
with SFMR, that was indicating
yeah,
it.
like
I
they
don't even
had
know.
all they had all the data, but that's a story for another day.
I know.
Um,
All right.
Yeah.
but
But we all think it's a
basic,
Category 3 at this point.
yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty solid, to say the least. Its appearance supports just enough for that.
Not just
Uh,
us saying it either. The ATCF system, run by the US Navy, they're going with 115 miles per hour as well. Whether the National Hurricane Center go on board with that, remains to be seen, because we had an extraordinary circumstance the other day when the ATCF actually named Gabrielle early and the National Hurricane Center didn't, and they had to go and take it off again. So that was quite remarkable what happened 2 days ago. So they don't always follow the ATCF system, but usually they do. But it tends to be the other way around when if it's in the NHC area, which is the Atlantic and East Pacific. The ATCF usually copies them, so it's quite interesting to see that they've gone first with upgrading the storm.
Yeah.
Wanted to feel special.
But the National Hurricane Center are producing hourly updates still. The 9 p.m. update didn't have the storm upgraded. It was still 110 and a pressure of 958. They do have it moving due north, or 360 degrees, at 8 miles per hour and a pressure of 958. So we will see at the end of this hour of discussion whether they have upgraded it or not. It really, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't mean much. There is hardly any difference between 110 and 115 miles per hour, but we just want this thing to end, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah.
If you've got any comments or questions for us during this hour of discussion, you can send in a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text if you're watching us on our YouTube chat, and we can pick up the questions straight away. And already a few of you have done that, already know how the process works. Could it make landfall in North Carolina is a question that we get from Dawson Godfrey. And yes, it would seem the most likely scenario at this point, right?
Yes, it does.
Definitely.
I believe, hasn't the National Hurricane Center forecast
Yeah,
have the
if
center
you follow the center line, of course, we've got to point out there is a cone there for a reason, and it can go west or east. Can't rule out a South Carolina landfall even, or we can't rule out the storm not making landfall at all. But at this point, especially if it's going to pass extremely close to North Carolina, it doesn't really matter whether it makes landfall or not. If it is within 20 or 30 miles of a landfall, you're going to get the worst conditions from the hurricane.
Yeah.
I think the recent cone had it about like 5 miles off the coast of North
5
Carolina,
miles off the coast.
the Outer Banks.
Wow.
That was just an estimate.
Interesting.
Not about.
I've just been told here from another viewer that there's a slight risk from coastal areas of Georgia and the Carolinas from the SPC, so I don't know if that tells you anything.
Yeah, that just shows that there's an increased and heightened level of probability for severe weather within the area, capable of producing isolated areas of tending to be like more severe than usual. Of course, you have tropical storm force winds, the possibility for its tornadic threat, and of course hail and things like that of nature associated with severe weather.
Dorian's not the only thing that's active right now. If we just scroll back through some of these images, you can see floater imagery of Typhoon Lingling, which is intensifying what appears to be pretty rapidly. It has now got a 14 degrees Celsius eye. It has got cloud tops encircling the storm completely with near minus 70 or even higher than that in terms of cloud top heights. That indicates to us a Category 4 at least. Well, not saying it's a Category 5 or anything, but a minimal Category 4 at least, and it could be a little bit more than just a minimal Category 4. 130 miles an hour is what our latest estimate is on that storm. That is what we ran with in the Tropical Weather Bulletin just over an hour ago. And it's slowly meandering towards the north, a very oscillating initial track there, and very close to some of those Japanese islands. Miyakojima, just over an hour and a half ago, was 44 miles from the center of the eye, so they're going to get some serious typhoon conditions there in the Japanese islands. Some questions again. How many miles is Dorian from the coastline at the moment? I was supposed to mention this before because I did have that number with me. I'm just going to do another calculation to see if it's changed at all. It was 96 miles off the coast a few moments ago, and I'm just trying to see if we can get another estimate now. 96 miles from the closest point of the coast of Georgia a few moments ago. and I'm just going to try and get a new image here, which will be able to give you a new readout as of 22 minutes past, which is just 2 minutes ago. It is now around 97 miles from Sapelo Island off the coast of Georgia. That puts it 106 miles from Brunswick and 112 miles from Savannah. That is a bit close for comfort at this point. And we're just looking at every frame of that storm imagery just to see, is it going to start that northeast turn? It needs to, if we're going to see anywhere near a good outcome out of this storm.
Yeah, it's honestly, this remains to be a threat as usual. It's its whole life at this point. It's been threatening land, and it seems as though it's just going to continue to do such up to the point that it begins transitioning, unfortunately. But for the moment, as long as in the southeast, those threats for wind damage, flooding, and even storm surge remains high for areas such as Charleston and North Carolina and South Carolina, and I believe still Georgia.
You'll have also noticed that I've not been reading out the eye temperature very much in recent streams. That's because I don't actually have the data. I'm just going to see if I can possibly get a little readout here now. Yep, eye temperature is really warm, 16 degrees Celsius, and that is pretty damn good. And looking at them cloud tops, I mean, really, this is on satellite much stronger. Looks much stronger than it is, because you could argue a case for category 4 on this imagery alone, but it isn't. Don't worry that much. Direct observations from recon planes take more precedence, way more precedence than satellite imagery, so we take their information with much more substance. And they're saying, what, 120 knot flight level winds, so that's probably about 105 knots on the ground. But those are estimates, and they're not actually surface. They got 115 on the surface, did they? 115 miles per hour? I think that they're getting decent readings of 115 on the surface, near enough.
Yeah.
But you look at one look at the imagery, and you could make a case for 130 miles an hour, but it's not the case. So it does look worse than it is, even though it still does look pretty bad. Alright, let's see if we've got any more questions. We're here for the hour to take those questions at this point. And pretty much similar questions in the line of thinking. Do we see any possibility of Dorian bumping up to a category 4? Well, you can every so often you see on the bottom of our screen we list the chances of the storm intensifying further, and I think we're given what, a 10% chance of that happening. You know, it can happen. There is precedent for that, thinking Hugo more than anything, but most likely. And here's the thing, if the storm does strengthen officially into category 3 status, it's still moving pretty slow. So if it does get close to the coast of the Carolinas, there's a little bit cooler water there, less heat energy because it's just off the Gulf Stream. And so you'll probably get a little bit of weakening before the landfall, probably back down to category 2 again. And yeah, really, I think we've got about 6 hours left of strengthening time before the weakening begins again. Unless the storm deviates and does take an abrupt turn towards the northeast and perches right over the Gulf Stream, where it could then strengthen towards high-end category 3 as it shoots off northeast, but it would be further away from land, and that would actually be better news. But at the minute, still heading due north, which is, as you can see, on a collision course with South Carolina, unless it starts turning northeast, which it should, but all too late to avoid hurricane conditions along the coast, and that is why we have that hurricane warning. Just seeing here, there aren't that many comments coming in at this point, so I can actually see people who aren't tagging us. Here is a question as well. Do we think a hurricane like this could hit Portugal?
No.
No.
I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
The
I'm
closest
sorry.
thing was Leslie
Yeah.
last year,
And I believe
right?
I believe it went and I believe it went
Yeah.
into extratropical transition beforehand.
Will Dorian be the same track as Irene? Well,
No.
Irene made landfall much further east, didn't it? But it definitely moved much further north than this will.
Yeah. This Dorian at the moment it's doing its own thing. It's not going to be like Irene. But what I can say at the moment, what Dorian is doing, it looks like not sure if you can confirm this for me, but it looks like there is some convective blow-ups around the eye on
Yeah,
Saturday.
absolutely. It's been going on for a while, and
Yeah.
he's still doing it, blowing up, doing the circles around the eye. You can see it trailing along. Convective
That
blow-ups.
southern portion especially
Absolutely.
looks a lot stronger.
Yeah.
I just
It's
wonder if I
definitely-
can check. Let's see, longer range radar. Just looking out of Charleston, you can see most of the. You can't really see the southern side. Let me just check further south. Might be able to get a better picture of the southern side of the eye on the radar. I'm just looking at. Doesn't really look that strong on the southern side. Northwestern still looks like it's taking it on, which has been the case for a while.
Yeah. I think the best I've seen when it comes to radar would have to be from the Jacksonville radar.
Yep, that's what I'm looking at the minute. But I can tell you, short range, looking in pretty close. Some pretty heavy downpours look like they're occurring along pretty much the whole coast from where's that we're looking at there. Is it Hinesville? Can't quite read the text. In Georgia, extending all the way up to Georgetown. Some significant rainfall occurring all along there. And just to take a look at 1 hour rainfall totals in the area, yep, they're creeping up. And storm total rainfall along that zone is getting into the 2 to 3 inch range and building. Areas near Charleston, just north and east of Charleston, have had the most rain so far at about 3 inches. This is Force 13 Live, our continuing coverage on the storm. We had a short break from live streaming earlier today whilst we regathered our stuff together and to make a sort of like a dual screen here so that we can show you everything that's going on around the world, because we have about 7 storms active all around the world at this point. Dorian being just one of them, it is still by far the main threat. But also, I lost my train of thought on that. But we've been working extremely long hours over the last few days here covering Dorian. Most of the team have, I think, are recuperating far, far away from here. But this storm has just been something else over the last 5 days.
Yeah, honestly, it's already made history for itself, and now it's still continuing to bring the similar threats that it had brought to the Bahamas earlier on.
Ram, anything you'd like to bring up at this point? I mean,
I did
things
see.
like... Go on.
I guess I did see a question from Alex Ross. Is this worse than the last year hurricane that hit here? So I'm going to assume that's Florence.
Florence.
And I think Florence would definitely be worse, even though Florence would be weaker, just simply because Florence affected a lot more of the Carolinas than Dorian is going to, as Dorian's mostly just going to affect most of the coastal areas.
The coast, yeah.
Well, Florence really just stalled over the Carolinas for 4 days.
I mean, yeah, you think
And
of
so-
places like your area, Raleigh, you're looking at about 32% chance of tropical storm force winds. What did we have down for the rainfall estimates?
In Raleigh, I believe it was 6 inches.
6 inches.
And
And do you know what you got during Florence?
no, but I do remember. But I did get the winds getting to about 50 miles an hour in Raleigh during Florence.
And where were the worst places that were affected by flooding during Florence?
During Florence, definitely. I know. Let's see. I'd say the southeast region of North Carolina. That inland coastal plain is definitely low-lying and really prone to flooding. Areas like New Bern, Wilmington. I know they got probably hit the hardest.
Do you think that's going to
anywhere
happen again here?
in North Carolina. I'm sorry?
Do you think that's going to happen again here?
Definitely. I think the Southeast is definitely going to be in for another one with Dorian. But
we continue to watch it like a hawk on our imagery here on the right-hand panel. The storm continuing to certainly look the part. National Hurricane Center haven't yet pulled the trigger on calling this a major hurricane, even though it certainly looks like one, and some observations, I mean, they're really on the borderline for Category 3. We did pull the trigger a few hours ago and went ahead and put it up to 115 miles an hour. It is just 5 mile an hour difference between the National Hurricane Center's Category 2 advisory and our Category 3, so I wouldn't read too much into it, just that hurricane force conditions are likely along the coast and it could have a major impact. And it's bringing with it a 7-foot storm surge for some areas. And we heard just then about the low-lying parts of South Carolina and North Carolina that could be exposed to that, and it could cause severe problems. Flash flood watch is in effect for large parts of all 3 states of Georgia, South and North Carolina. And if there are any new warnings that come into effect, we'll make sure we get them onto the air, and particularly looking out for any flash flood warnings that get put into place, because then you know it's a really dangerous situation. Tropical storm warnings extending quite far inland as well, almost as far as Columbia. Columbia itself not under a tropical storm warning, however. I believe now we're also joined by Isaac.
Hello.
It sounds windy over there. Is that the bands of Fernand in Texas?
Yeah, surprisingly, we're still getting. I'm just walking around out here. I was trying to get some good pictures of some storms nearby, but no luck. So.
Fernand, just a small system for that region. Didn't really strike Texas at all, actually. Delivering significant amounts of rainfall, as expected.
It's given us some scattered rain showers. We had a nasty little pop-up storm go right over my my place, knock out the power for about 10 and 15 minutes or so, and caused some pea-sized hail to fall down.
Interesting.
Other than that, it's been about, I guess, like an average summer day over here.
And what have you made of, obviously, the main event and feature here, the main problem we've got right now, Hurricane Dorian, which appears to be re-strengthening?
Yeah, I was looking at that and then saw the eye start to get more and more well-defined, and we're kind of suggesting Dorian may become a 115 mile an hour storm, or about 100 knot storm. I know on the ATCF they upped it to 100, but I think the NATF kept it at
very windy over there, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a good spot where it's facing away from the wind, but
yeah,
no
let's
luck.
hope you find one soon. I'm not
Sorry
sure how
if it's
long we
really
can run with that
overpowering.
for.
Fernand is attempting to join the call.
Yeah, trying to
Indeed.
make his presence known.
Yep, Fernand. If we could speak to Fernand, then we'd probably do a bit of dissing, because it didn't really do very well, thankfully. Could still deliver
Yeah, it looks
15
ugly,
inches of
well,
rain to
honestly.
parts of Mexico, however, so that is something to certainly look at. But back to Dorian, and you can see on the latest imagery again that convection wrapping around the eye. There's still 1 or 2 gaps there, so I really don't think in the last day or maybe even 2 that this storm has actually had a complete eye wall. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
I think it, but I believe the portion missing of the current eye wall is on the eastern side, on
Eastern
radar at least.
on radar.
On radar at least, it seems that though.
Yeah,
Not
I'd
certain.
say
That could make
I'd say
sense.
south and eastern.
And we've been saying
Yeah.
we've been saying so many things in the last few days. We've been saying the western eye is collapsing, the eastern eye is looking awful on radar, the southern side isn't looking very good, and this storm has been, I don't know, pretty much the most difficult Atlantic storm to forecast.
Yeah,
Definitely.
An absolute nightmare.
first was trying to figure out if it was going under eye wall replacement cycles or not, to figure out if that would give some sort of reason for periods of unanticipated or unusual periods of waning within the cloud tops. And then in other instances of where exactly the storm was going to slow down over, or if it was going to continue west towards Florida. It was just everywhere. And we were so confident at the start that this storm was going to impact Florida, and look at where we are now.
Yep, at one point every single major model had a Florida landfall as a major hurricane. Then the next day, none of them had a Florida landfall. And then the next day, some of them had a Florida landfall. And then they all had a North Carolina landfall, and they still do. I don't think all the models have a North Carolina landfall at this point.
No.
I would have to go back
Some
and check.
do.
Some do. Let me just see, looking
I
at the
think that
latest.
really shows.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think that really shows how just difficult the storm's been to forecast, because every year you always get that one storm that just doesn't do what it's originally supposed to do, or what we think it's originally supposed to do. But with Dorian, it's just been, we think it's going to do something, and then it does something else, and then we predict that something else, and then it does something else, and I just don't think I've ever been right with this storm.
Actually, I gotta say, pretty much every model has a landfall at this point. I think there's just 1 or 2, probably just 1. No, I think 2 actually, that has it just about 5 or 10 miles off Cape Hatteras. So that's the closest that doesn't make landfall. And I think a few of these models, I can't quite tell because it's very close knit and difficult to see, but I think some of them are calling for a South Carolina landfall. I know an earlier run of the GFS did. One of this morning's GFS runs had a landfall in South Carolina. Let me just check the latest GFS, which is the one that we usually look at, especially on our updates, our normal updates. Just checking latest. The 12Z run didn't have a landfall at all, I don't think, and the 18Z just scrapes along South Carolina and makes landfall on the Outer Banks. Very fine margins, but pretty much the whole coastal region will get hurricane force conditions over the next few days.
Yeah,
Couple of days.
I actually have an uncle that lives on the southern portion of the Outer Banks, so he remains to be in that region. He owns 2 properties, but he's decided to stick in this one for now. But I wonder how he'll be dealing with the storm. He went through Florence fine. I'm not sure if he's decided to stay or what to do exactly, but it seems as though it's not looking too great for the Carolinas at the moment.
On the right-hand side of the screen, we are watching the storm in real time. Hate to be hopeful, but latest frames sort of show maybe a bit of a stalling or possible eastward movement. I don't want to say it.
I don't
Probably
think
being
it's a good idea.
very hopeful, but
Yeah.
still, the general movement over the last 6 hours is north at roughly 7 miles per hour, which means if it kept going in that direction and didn't deviate at all, 7 miles per hour would take the storm to a landfall in South Carolina in quite a while, 20 hours. We probably will see the storm speed up a bit. And eventually a lot. By Thursday night, Friday, this should be speeding up quite a bit.
Thankfully so, and hopefully it wouldn't have to continue being a threat for land areas in the United States. But then again, you of course have the possibility of impacts in maritime Canada because of extratropical transitions, but that comes later.
Indeed, and so yeah, about 130 miles from Charleston. You know, it should turn east a little bit, but if it did go due north, then it would make landfall within about 10 miles of Charleston. So that is something, probably a worst case scenario, that is possible.
Yeah, seems as though that's the case. Seems as though it won't do that for now, at least, but who's to say how close it'll end up getting? It's just gonna have to wait and see.
Alright, we got another 15 minutes of discussion here before we throw it back to the automated graphics. If you've got any questions for us, send a message in. Type Force 13 at the beginning of your message and it will light us up big and bright. Tag us. And then your question, and we'll be able to facilitate that. There is one that wasn't tagged, but I can see it here. How much is Dorian's slow speed contributing to the difficulty forecasting it? Well, the faster it starts moving, the easier it gets to forecast. So it is a little bit easier than it was earlier when it was moving at 0 miles an hour near the Bahamas. It is now at least moving at 7 or 8 miles an hour. And so it is becoming a bit easier. I doubt that it will move any further west than current in the forecast now. Maybe just a short jog, but overall I think if it was to make landfall, it's clearly going to be east of Charleston.
Yep. It seems as though that'll be the case. It'll have to do some serious western wobbles and jogging for it to exactly even impact Charleston.
Question about monetary damage. A bit early for that, don't you think? But I don't think, I don't think it's going to be enormous compared to some of the other storms. It is going to be big, but we're not looking at anything close to Irma because, yep, the Bahamas, the northern two islands did get absolutely destroyed, but Irma did the same damage to loads of different small island nations and Caribbean islands, and then went on to Florida as a landfall category 4, so certainly nothing like that, but still we could be looking at quite some damage. And I don't like talking about money. The human cost and the raw destruction cost has been immense on those two islands.
Yeah, it's honestly, without a doubt, going to be. It's already made history, and it's without a doubt going to be retired. Honestly, everything else beyond the Bahamas has just been insult to injury, pretty much, and continues to prove to be very impactful for other areas.
Will Dorian make landfall where Florence did, is a question we get here.
It's definitely possible. Florence made landfall around Wrightsville Beach, just south of it. And so it's definitely a possible landfall location. It's well within the cone.
And is it coming to New York City, is a question we get as well. No, although there's an
Not
11%
really.
chance of tropical storm force winds.
Yeah, it won't be going to New York City. Even with an 11% chance for tropical storm force winds.
Well, Approximately how many hours before it's likely to make landfall? Well, yeah, earlier I did an extrapolation, 20 hours if it kept going the same speed. That's not going to happen. It's going to go quicker, so and it's going to shift track. So if it was to make landfall on one of the bits that jut out in South or North Carolina, I doubt it will do it in South Carolina. I think it might do North Carolina near the Florence landfall, possibly. If that was to occur, that would be what, late tomorrow, do you think? Tomorrow night?
Late tomorrow or early Friday morning, most likely.
And then if it was to make landfall further up towards the Outer Banks, you'd be looking at Friday evening.
Friday during the day.
During the day? It will be speeding up
Yeah,
quite
Friday
rapidly
afternoon.
at that point. And a statement that Lingling is looking very energetic. Absolutely is. Our estimate has it currently at 130 mile per hour winds. It's looking very strong. Let's just see if we can get it back on the screen again. It is here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Just went past it. Yep, there it is again. You can see that imagery looking very good on the imagery. Eye temperature is at least 14 degrees Celsius plus. And the eye wall around it is wrapping around really nicely. Lots of deep cloud tops. At least 130 miles per hour, I would say, at this point. Let's just see if we can get some new information on that. New eye temperature. Wow, looking very good on the structure. I still think there might be an opening or two in the eye wall, but at present, an eye temperature of 18.4 degrees Celsius, which is just 4 degrees short of Dorian's peak. So that's quite remarkable. And the cloud tops northeastern side into the minus 80s in the last frame or two, minus 83 at a minimum. And in the southeastern side, we're looking at eye wall temperatures of minus 78. Those are very big numbers for this storm. On face value, you could make a case for Category 5 at this point, but it has only just happened. It has intensified rather quickly at this point, and so the winds do have to catch up to the satellite appearance. I would keep it about 130, maybe 140 miles an hour at the moment. But by tomorrow morning, or local time by the evening, we could be seeing this storm peaking as a high-end Category 4 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. So that is a very impressive storm, just on the back of Dorian in terms of chronology. Remarkable. We've got a few more minutes here to run, so let's see if we have any more questions. How many hours did Dorian remain stationary? A lot.
Just under 2 days, I think.
Yeah, this is a very long while.
Just under 2 days. Wow. How long has the storm been going on for? Yep, well, Dorian feels like it's been going on forever. It formed... I don't know when it formed, but it became a hurricane on the 30th of August, or the 29th of August.
I think it's lasted about 11 days so far.
Yeah, we're on advisory 46, so that'd be 11 and a half days.
And people saying nice things in the comments as well. We certainly appreciate the support we've received over the last few days. It has been immense, just like our coverage has. A huge amount of work goes into the production, updating all of the slides, updating all of the graphics. It's all done here at this desk, and has been done at this desk for the last 5 and a bit days. And this is where it all happens, and it's where we'll keep you up to date on these storms, at least for the foreseeable future, until we feel the need that we're just going to finish up the streaming. But for the time being, it's important to keep this rolling, and we will keep the satellite imagery rolling throughout the night tonight. We will be finishing shortly with our commentary, leaving you with the automated graphics and this what we're looking at on the screen here. I can tell you that Tim will be running an update on Dorian at 11 PM on the Force 13 YouTube channel, and I'll be back again with a 9 AM update as always tomorrow morning Eastern time on Dorian, and we'll probably have some updates on Lingling as well during that time too. It's going to be a very busy period once again. Let's see what else we've got here just before we finish up. What is causing Dorian to expand?
I think it's just the eyeball placement cycle to cause it's a bigger eye and it's impact.
Yep. And as we move along this imagery here, just to get some perspective about what else is going on in the Atlantic somewhere, moving along, there it is. We also have Tropical Depression Fernand, which made landfall as a tropical storm earlier in Mexico, now moving inland. Invest 92L, which has just cleared Bermuda and is moving towards the northeast, 60% chance of development. Gabrielle, a named storm in the eastern Atlantic. Someone asked earlier today whether it would be going to Florida. No, it is moving northwest and will move well out to sea over the central Atlantic. National Hurricane Center think it could become a hurricane on day 5 as it moves north. And then you've got that area of interest down there, disturbance 2. 0% chance in the next 5 days. Quite surprised it's still 0 in the next 24
0 in the next 48 hours.
But in the next 5 days, it's got, I think it was a 50% chance. I don't know if they've upped that again.
Yeah.
50%. Some models were indicating that
50.
could become a major hurricane, but the models earlier today, this morning, really backed off on that. So not sure what's going to happen with that now, suggesting possibly a minimal tropical storm at most.
Speaking of the National Hurricane Center, I don't know if anybody's read this out yet, but the 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time advisory is out. It is now, according to them, it is now moving north at 8 miles per hour, up from 7. The pressure has deepened to 955 millibars,
but crucially,
and they are keeping it.
Yeah.
They are keeping it as a Category 2 with 110 mile per hour wind.
Being the crucial point there, so they're still refusing to budge on that intensity, which I find very interesting, even though recon estimates have had Category 3. Also, the report, a buoy at Grays Reef, Georgia, recently measured sustained winds of 47 miles an hour and a gust of 65. An observation, I think that they mean to say an observation station or something, at Hilton Head, South Carolina. Recently measured sustained winds of 36 miles an hour and a wind gust of 47. Well, that's pretty much everything at this point. Oh, finally, we can show you some radar imagery. Oh, it went there. There it is. Isaac's showing us some radar imagery. You want to just tell us about this briefly? I don't have radar on my desk.
You can see really quickly, the storm has really developed in a pronounced eye wall here. You can see in the later frames the eastern side seems to be eroding a little bit, but that could be because of the radar being far away, so its beam is not able to pick up the eastern side as much. But it's a really well-pronounced high-end Category 2 hurricane. Could potentially become a Category 3 hurricane as it nears the Carolinas within the coming hours here. So people on the Carolinas need to be prepared and have their hurricane preparedness kits ready and on hand to be able to act accordingly. That's what I have to say.
Well, we think it is a Category 3 hurricane on the Force 13 analysis because of the satellite appearance, and it looks good on radar as well, and because of those recon observations, Isaac. What do you think personally?
I think if we see more readings of 100 knots on a recon, I would be inclined to go at the 115. I only saw about 2 readings so far on recon that had it up to 100 knots, but yeah.
What was most intriguing though is the ATCF system also has 100 knots, 115 miles an hour right now.
Yeah, I noticed that too. That was really interesting. That really happened where the NHC disagree with ATC.
Yeah, well, does sometimes happen. We're going to break off the coverage now. We're going to go back to the automated imagery, and this will update all on its own throughout the night tonight, so you can keep up to date on the storm if you do find yourself devoid of sleep, just like most of us are here at Force 13 HQ. And the warning information will go by on the screen as well. We'll try and keep you up to date the best we can. I think we've done a good job so far with this storm. There's still a lot more of it to go. The Carolinas are next, and we're going to be monitoring this very closely tomorrow. Update schedule, 11 p.m. There is an update coming up from Tim That will be on the Force 13 main channel, and we'll be running the 9 a.m. update live with you again, as we always do, tomorrow morning. But for now, that's it from us and the team. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good night.